Welcome, everyone, to another installment of our Moffett Library discussion newsletter cast for your entertainment. That is specifically not going to be the title, but we're still...
I will point out the podcasts are up now. The first one did go up yesterday, so we can't actually give it a name. What name would you like me to give it? I thought we were going to go with Moffett, Club Moffett Talks, since our branding is Club Moffett.
Right, we have shirts specifically.
Yes,
that's how you know it's official. Yeah, I think right now we'll probably just call it Club Moffett Talks, but I still want to put up a poll like on social media to see how people feel about it.
Yeah, we can always change it later. Also, you said you would write the blurb for the first episode, and you haven't done that yet.
So I will. That'll be done, I promise.
Okay.
We are joined by a very special guest, Dr. Tom Rohrig. Very nice having you on.
Well, thank you. And I don't have a doctorate yet.
I'm terribly sorry about that. I'm just, everyone around here that we talk to, I've gotten used to doing that. And I've had a professor that I work with a little bit specifically tell me stop calling him doctor. So
okay.
My apologies for that.
No problem.
Let's just kind of get into this. So you're at Texas Tech. What do you do over there?
Sure. Well, at Texas Tech, I have several hats. My main job is as a personal librarian, and I work with the Department of Political Science. And the personal librarian name is something that we decided to go with instead of our earlier title of subject librarian, to indicate that we were very open to working with faculty, staff, and students. So with political science, I do library instruction. I keep up the different LibGuides for political science and public administration, which they cover. I do collection development for them and pretty much anything library. Now, my other two jobs, are as the Federal Depository Coordinator, as a regional coordinator for federal documents. And Texas, being so large, has two regional libraries, one at Tech and one at the Texas State Library. And briefly, one of the main points of a regional is to retain most of the material that the federal government sends out indefinitely. We're sort of a library of last resort. And then finally, my other job is the Patent and Trademarks Resource Center coordinator. So I do a lot with federal information of all sorts.
That's really interesting. Was that kind of an extrapolation on your political science subject, or did they all just kind of come together naturally that way?
Somewhat. I started out first with government information. When I came to Tech, I was the business librarian. Then I transferred, it's now mass media. When I was doing it, it was mass communications. And then it was after that I went to political science, and then also added patents and trademarks. So it's been sort of an evolution, but it actually did start more with government information.
I see. That's very interesting. That's how we were introduced. You're the regional director over us. We're also part of the Federal Depository here. We actually just went through a pretty significant weeding process. We had a giant renovation, and we had to figure out what we were doing with that. And we're still kind of figuring out how we want to proceed, but we have a pretty comprehensive LibGuide. You mentioned those. We're still trying to expand that and get our content mostly digital to our audience.
In the age of COVID, that's actually kind of important, is the more digital. Who knew we were in the cutting edge when we were doing this? Yeah, the digital content is becoming a much larger thing. I want to talk to Tom about something a little bit in the future that you have planned, but that reminded me of something I wanted to talk to him about. Well, we got a little bit of who you are. Give us a little bit of your background. Where are you from? How'd you get into librarianship?
Okay. Well, I grew up in Colorado, and I went to the University of Northern Colorado. I was going to be an accountant, and then I got into it and I thought. So I switched to management, which I liked. And at the time, I was working at the Greeley, Colorado County Library, and I really enjoyed it. And the staff there said, Tom, with a business background, that would be perfect for becoming a librarian. So I decided, yeah, I do like that. So I went on to University of Denver, got my master's, and then started looking for a job. And fortunately, I landed in Texas at Texas Tech.
That's interesting because I find that is what's happened with a lot of librarians. A lot of librarians start off going one direction and they realize, you know what, I love libraries, or I love being in libraries, I like being around libraries, or they had a part-time job in a library, and they then make that their life work. At least I want to say half the full-time professional staff here at our library, that's their career path. And I think that's interesting because that's something that I think it's kind of unique to librarians in some extent, that it's not necessarily the first choice, but it's something that we find that we have an aptitude toward, or something we really love to do. Lord knows we're not in it for the pay, but it's interesting that that's something that happens a lot with libraries. In my case, if you're wondering, I actually flunked out of college and I wondered what to do with my life. And my mom said, well, you spend so much time in libraries, Ryan, why don't you make a career out of it? And that's what I ended up doing. I ended up going back to school, finishing up my undergraduate degrees, and then going on to my master.
So much the better for it.
Yeah.
And despite your failing, that I didn't know about until just now, so I'll be sure to keep that tucked away. No, I just consider that I'm looking on at both of you with envy, because I just started my master's degree in library science, and it is causing me a great deal of hardship. So, for what it's worth, I'm a little envious at the moment.
But I know it's difficult for you, Chris. I'm sorry, we're going to go off of this for a second, Tom. But I know it's hard for you, Chris, but you are making a high A in the class, both of your classes. So you're doing fine. I know you think you're not, but you are doing fine.
It's only a matter of time. But really, talk about small world. My dad's entire side came from Denver. Now they live, or a lot of them live here. My uncle on his side teaches at University of Denver. He's a music instructor, and he comes from Nebraska, which is also, I believe, where Ryan is from. So
yeah, my family's from Nebraska. I spent my first 10 years in Nebraska before they moved to
and
Texas.
My mother is from Nebraska. So small world.
No way. Yeah, talk about a small world. That's incredible. Let's back away a little bit and let me just ask you, what have you been doing lately? Watch any movies, read any good books?
Well, I finally decided to go with Netflix streaming, because I had been going with getting the DVDs, which curiously, there are more movies on DVD than streaming. I am working back at Tech. I'm working half at home and half at the library, because our buildings now are at 50% capacity. And that has been nice. And as you all had mentioned, going more digital, that has been a real godsend, I think, for us in all areas. And with government information, with what the individual depositories digitize, what the government publishing office digitizes, what we get in Haughty Trust, all of these really help. And of course, the government agencies, and some are better than others at digitizing. It has really helped. And I think a lot of times patrons, when they're Googling, as they do, run across a lot of government information that they may not even realize as such. So that is all good.
And I would like to point out that it's really some of the librarians who have led the charge on that. I'm thinking of Melody Kelly out of North Texas State University, when a few years ago, and the incoming president got rid of the entire archive that was online of executive orders. It was Melody Kelly and the government documents department over up in Denton, Texas, that basically archived everything. They went ahead and digitized everything and archived it. And for a while, it may still be, for I don't know, it was the official archive of executive orders for government documents. So people don't realize the fact that librarians have been kind of leading the charge as far as digitization and trying to get information out to people.
When we were starting this weeding project, the goal was to get it down to a really kind of minimal size, and I was starting to get really concerned that we wouldn't have nearly enough digital backups or archives for the stuff that we had here. And I was shocked to see that so much of it had already been put up on either archive.org or Hadi Trust, and just all of these different resources. That it's really shocking just how much of that is now like fully digital, like the whole individual items.
That is a very good point. I am very pleased with how much is there. I also work with Trail, which is the Technical Reports Archive Inventory. And that, I know I've gotten the full title a little wrong, but it works with federal government technical reports. And we are constantly gathering material and digitizing it. And this year we are digitizing some microcards. And I don't know, do you all have microcards?
We do. I will take that one. We do have some microcards. I forget what exactly the name of it is, but it's a collection of early publications, like 16th, 17th, and 18th century publications. If someone wants to look at that, unfortunately, they'd have to talk to the electronic and serials librarian, because we'd have to put in a special lens to actually read the microcard stuff.
We actually just got a question about that just the other day. Someone was looking up research, and that was literally the only item that they could find that was like perfect for their essay or whatever they were doing. And our students had no idea what this collection even was. And it's back here in our cataloging department off in the background. And I'm surprised by how much we have back there.
That is interesting. At our library, we have, thankfully, we do not go into microcards as big as some other libraries. We have, I want to say it may be early American imprints, maybe that title. I think that is one that we have. And there are a couple others, and we only have one machine that will read it. We don't really have ability to do a lot of printing unless our digitization people get involved. So it's one of those things that is very hard to use. If people hate microfilm and microfiche, they will really have problems with microcards.
And I guess I should explain to our audience who are going, what the heck are these people talking about? First off, there's stuff called microfiche and microfilm. It is exactly what it sounds like. For those of you who watch spy movies, it's basically little tiny pictures of pages of a document that have been put onto a little piece of see-through film that you then expose to a light and you blow up and you can actually read it.
Well, not just that. Horror movies, when like in the really schlocky horror movies, when the main character has to learn every single detail about the thing that's haunting them.
When they go through the old newspaper reels and stuff like that, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Microcards are different in the fact that they are opaque, which means you need a special type of machine to actually read them, and they are harder to use. But I guess the technique was older or a little bit cheaper probably to use?
I think so. As I recall, the idea was, hey, if we can use microfiche, why can't we get more on a card? And it was one of those technologies that sounded good, but it just sort of stalled. So there are a lot of collections around libraries nationwide, but they're not always used very much because they're so hard to access.
That was the class I took back when I was in library school. It's called Emerging Technologies. One of the case studies we studied was the boom of the microfiche, microfilm, and microcards in the early 70s. They literally thought that that was going to be the future, that everything would be recorded in that type of format for the next 100 years. And so because of what people were saying, felt that they should switch over their entire catalogs or most of their holdings into these smaller ways to hold information. And it does hold a lot of information in all place, but I don't think anyone saw the boom of the computer age or the digital age. Then they didn't realize that that would actually be the future that would go into instead of recording things on small little pictures.
So something that really interests me about this, and it kind of goes into a little bit of what I'm doing with my class. I'm actually studying right now on I'm putting it as a moral imperative, but it's basically the need for not just libraries, but just in general, video games to be archived like a little stronger than they are right now. There's a lot of weird legal areas to go along with that. And one of the problems, and it touches on this a lot, is the nature of proprietary hardware to actually archive a lot of this material. I'm sure that it's probably not a huge amount, but just to consider how much was printed exclusively or largely on these microcards or even other sort of micro material, that's information that could potentially be lost forever if these proprietary bits of hardware are either no longer in production or just get discarded through time.
That's a very good point. I teach a 1-hour credit course on Introduction to Scholarly Research, and I was showing the students the Internet Archive, and I believe that they have a section where they archive software programs.
That's right. Yeah, I noticed that. I think last year it wasn't the Atari. I think it was like the entire Amiga software line was completely uploaded to archive.org. The problem there is, where is the legality lie in that? Like, are there still even copyright holders for this kind of material, or has it just evaporated into the air at this point?
That's a good point, and copyright is always such a concern. At Trail, there are government documents, a number of departments, and I want to say maybe NASA, as some of their publications, they have gotten foreign material and then they have republished it. And at this point, we are not looking at that material because we don't have the time and have set up the structure to review the copyright of that material, even though it would be useful. So yeah, copyright is always a question, and hopefully the Internet Archive has looked at that.
And just let people know, Trail is a search tool that's used at the Texas State Library Archives Commission.
Well, that's a good point, because there's two trails. The one that I was talking about is separate, and it's Technical Report Archive and Image Library. Now, the one at the Texas State Library is the system for digitizing Texas agency publications. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I had thought about, as far as a trademark, I guess there has not been a concern on either side of that, because they really are sort of close.
Yeah, I was about to say, okay, I did not realize that there were two separate ones out there. All right. That's a problem, actually.
What's really interesting to me about this is that, unless I read this totally incorrectly, government publications have only been fully legally available for the public in their entirety for just a few years now. Unless I'm totally mistaken about that. Like, the ability for people to even look up stuff like this has been a relatively new occurrence.
Are you talking about physical or digital?
Digital, I think. But yeah, I mean, of course, physical, but just the fact that so much has been digitized only in recent years, and just the breadth of material that's out there that needs to be backed up is, I'm surprised that anyone's even doing it, especially the quantity that they are.
Well, it costs money and effort. We've done some digitization projects here, and we had to get grants basically to cover the cost of the labor. It's very labor intensive.
Oh yeah.
And that's one thing that people don't seem to realize, is the amount of labor that goes into actually digitizing stuff.
You have to have equipment for it too. Like there's a lot involved.
Also, there are people also that like to use, there are some that just take the scan of it. There are others who try to have some sort of software which will actually encode the content word by word. There's different levels of digitization you can go through, basically. We're talking too much, Tom. I'm sorry about that.
No, not at all. It's great talking with people who know documents. As Chris was saying, I think that is true, that there has been an explosion of digitization. And one of the things that makes it so important is that a lot of government agencies, and it's just like businesses, they'll put information on their website and the new information comes along and they may not archive it. They may just take it off. And particularly with government information, that older material can still be valuable. So it is great that the libraries like you and Tech and North Texas and all over the country are digitizing material to make sure that it is there for the future. Also, I noticed after the new administration, the presidency came in, the White House website, a lot of material was deleted. There is a program from in the library community to archive material after each presidency. And I think that is one of the most important projects that I've heard of for preserving material.
It's also really, really crucial where everything's very divisive right now. Just having a snapshot of literally what is happening and literally what has happened before is one of the most important things that we as an archival service can do. Like so there's not just one message going out into the world. There's troves and troves of information that might have been lost or suppressed over time.
And this brings up something I wanted to ask Tom. I mentioned it earlier. Just so you know, let me set the scene. I was teaching a class for social work earlier this year, and I had taught the class last semester. And it was interesting because what they wanted to know was basically resources they could use to gather statistics on small community. What was very interesting to me is a lot of the resources that I had seen last semester weren't there anymore. And I told the group, this is a very long ongoing trend that's been happening with government documents, where the groups that have gathering statistics, those organizations are gathering fewer statistics. They're being defunded. There are places now in the government where there was an entire huge branch or department that took care of statistics that just no longer exists anymore. It was very interesting because I went to a website that had been used. I had used the semester before, and I just went to it in the class to show them. And it basically said, we've been defunded. So none of the stuff we had here 3 months ago is here anymore. I know Tom knows a little bit more about this than I do, but I think this is one of the major problems right now with government documents. At least, again, the pride I can always say with government documents is this is a great source of statistics. This is a great source for you guys to find information about things that can help in your paper, it can help you in your jobs. Again, I was shocked at how much had dried up just in the last few years, even though this is an ongoing thing that's been going on for almost 15, 20 years now. But I was surprised at how little there was out there anymore.
I'd also like to hear, Tom, your opinion on this quite a bit. But first, I wanted to just say that when we were first starting to talk about what was going on with the pandemic, and I let you know about what was happening with us, you looked at our LibGuide for our government publications and had some very nice things to say. So I'd like to thank you personally while I have the chance.
It is excellent.
Thank you. I didn't. The person who was in charge of that, I don't think is here anymore.
I wrote the first one.
Okay.
Then you revised it. So.
Okay, but the thing with like the real insanity with that is that as soon as this hit, we had already been talking about not so much recovering that LibGuide because it had been kind of pushed to the side a little bit, but it was just cleaning it up, just making sure that everything worked the way it should. Over half of those links were dead.
Yeah.
Either they were redirected or they just brought me up to a splash page that just said the White House is no longer hosting this service. But it took so much effort just to find those resources that should have been free or were already available to us that just vanished. It's just someone in a government office somewhere said, we don't want this available anymore. So I really appreciate you saying something nice about it, because it took a little more work than people might realize just to get that free information back to the public.
You bring up a really good point about less access to information. I think some of this comes from a feeling that the federal government is not as important. And certainly, as people have worked with government information for years, we know there's such an incredible amount of information that the federal government puts out. But now I think there has been a lot of defunding that you've run across. That is a real problem when it involves statistics. I've always told people that the federal government is the world's largest gatherer and disseminator of statistics. And so when you use databases like Statista, ProQuest, Statistical Insight, I'd say a good part, if not the majority, of the sources are from the federal government. And a lot that are coming from the private sector will include government information and then plus other information. So that is a real challenge. And I've always been real interested in community profile research. Years ago, my former boss, Marianne Higdon, I had done a Lubbock bibliography print, and she had suggested that I send it to the Texas State Library to be distributed as a Texas State document, which I did. And I was really impressed because most of the resources that I used were government information from transportation, from census, from commerce, from agriculture. And this is what people rely on when they're doing their community profiles. I mean, we look at the situation with the census, shutting it down early. It's not only going to be a problem for the current, there's going to be less information. But then when you think, I think it's 80 years hence when they open the actual information and genealogists look at it, there's going to be a lot of people that are not included. So that's another problem that I see.
That sounds like a complete nightmare. Like someone's going to have a really bad weekend when they realize that this is like all of this information is just gone. Like it's just a big empty sheet.
I have a history degree, and I know that one of the things historians are talking about is the later half of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century, there's going to be a loss of information from stuff like emails. They're not archived. So we won't have, again, a lot of the information that we have from the past is based on letters. Those no longer exist because people are emailing each other and those emails aren't archived anywhere. You're going to see a loss because of things like we've talked about before. The media type has changed. For instance, I know that NASA has lost a great deal of its data because the old magnetic reels have decayed to the point now where they can't read them anymore. So again, this is something it's going to happen. It's going to be known for a fact that between like 1950 and hopefully maybe 2000, hopefully that we're archiving stuff better now, but there's going to be this great loss of historical data that we usually have.
Well, people are only just now realizing about disk decay. And everyone thought that CDs and DVDs were a wave of the future, but now as we're looking at some items that may not have been kept up with so much, a lot of just any kind of data disks have literally started to decay in their cases. And
this is something that's actually been known about in the community because of laser discs.
Exactly.
Laser discs only have like a half-life of like 15, 20 years. So the old laser discs, 1970s, were starting to decay in the 90s. So this is something that people were kind of aware of, but I guess the general public wasn't aware of at the time.
The weirdest thing there is that that's all a push from fan communities and from the general public and people who are particularly passionate about these art forms. They're the ones who have to note about this first, and they're the ones who are usually in the cutting edge of archival. A lot of the online processes that we're using right now come from just user interest in archiving this stuff. Think about, we use so many online databases or online storefronts. Like, I use Spotify every single day to listen to music. That wouldn't exist if users hadn't been uploading their, frankly, illegal content on like Napster. And that was entirely based on the need to get these forms of content available in a way that was going to last in perpetuity.
Wow, this has gotten deep.
Like, again, this is like that video game essay that I'm going to write. A big problem with that is that there's so much that simply doesn't exist anymore. And the only reason that some content is even available is because of archival methods like emulation that it isn't a, at best, legal gray area, but without it, stuff simply would not exist. I'm going to bow out now because that I've been ranting. I'm sorry. This is what happens when I'm allowed to speak freely.
I will step in and move us along. So, Tom, let's talk a little bit about COVID. You've talked a little bit about before about the fact that you're at 50% usage in the building. Is the library still open to the public? Is the depository still open to the public? This is one of the things that Chris wanted to mention in this particular interview is, how are you doing? How are things going in the age of COVID?
Well, we were closed for a number of months. We reopened, I want to say in sometime in August. I'll tell you, time sort of slips by. We were first open for just limited staff, and then we reopened to the public. And we started just being open Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then I think it was last week, we opened hours on the weekend, and then now Monday through Friday is 7 a.m. to midnight. I must say, I'm so impressed with everyone in every campus across the nation that prepared for the reopening of buildings, the cleaning, the social distancing, everything that has been done, requiring masks. So I think Texas Tech has done a great job, although, as they're always saying, you can control on campus, but off campus is another matter.
You just really have to trust the people to do what they need to do. And in some cases, it's hard to keep up with it, especially right now. I've seen the term COVID fatigue coming around. Just people are tired of the pandemic at this point, but that doesn't mean it's going away. I'm tired of it too, but I'm still extremely paranoid about everything that's going on. But in our campus, it's going pretty okay. We still have to tell people, like, we have to get on the intercom and tell people, please put on your masks. We don't want to have to resort to removing you, but we have these policies in place.
And talking about COVID fatigue, the night manager is stressed out because he walks the floors constantly trying to tell people, put your mask on. All right, there are too many people in the study room. They're only supposed to have 2 people in the study room. Some of you are going to have to leave. And it's fatiguing on all of us that are here as staff because we don't like doing this. We don't like being the person saying, no, you can't do this. That goes against the creed of the librarianship to some extent. But again, we're trying to keep people safe, not only the students, but ourselves and our loved ones.
I think Philip is going to have a mental breakdown very shortly, and we'll probably be here to see it. But yeah, he is having a really hard time of it right now.
Yeah,
he's pretty much the one person in charge of enforcing all of it. And for my part, like, if I'm going around, I see people not wearing masks, I try to be polite, please, we're doing this for you. We need you to follow the rules. But it's not just a matter of people getting bored of the pandemic. It's people who are kind of at their wits' end in dealing with it.
Yeah.
But Texas Tech, by all means, it sounds like you guys are doing pretty good.
I think so. We also have provided masks at our entrance, and that is something. And I check the bins when I go in and out, and they are always full. And although I think that is they're being provided by the university administration, Tech has some ambassadors walking around, and they have masks to give out, and they also will give food coupons for people who are following the rules, which I think
Oh,
it's always nice to have positive reinforcement. Now, at Tech, we have closed all of our group and individual study rooms. And that is a problem because we're constantly getting questions. We have extended, though, Wi-Fi access outside in a lot of areas. And so that has helped, but I know that people are so used to these study rooms. It is a challenge.
yeah, I mean, we have so many people who just come here exclusively to have somewhere to study. I've noticed some students who are here the moment their class is let out and they're here until we close. So the fact that it's kind of a difficult situation for them too, who are really trying to follow the rules and who are really just here because they need to be. You're in kind of an interesting position because you also are in contact with a lot of different libraries. We're one tiny part of the region that you're director over. Have you noticed any other trends that are happening with the other libraries you talk to?
That's a good question. Let's see. In the summer, Angela Kent, who's the other regional librarian, we had done an online meeting for the depository libraries. Did you attend? I can't remember the list, but we are going to be doing another one, I think, next month, and we'll be getting the word out. But I think that as far as trends, libraries are reopening. I think they are continuing to emphasize their online offerings, chat. And I know I really enjoy chat. And on the weekends, when we don't have official chat hours, I answer a lot of email questions. And I'm always fascinated by questions that people have. So I would say that increased emphasis on online access, more chat services, and just trying to take care of each other. There are a lot of virtual happy hours that libraries do. So I think there's a lot of emphasis on maintaining everyone's mental health in this time.
What do those happy hours look like?
Usually they will go on Zoom and they will get together. And I know we have done at Tech, we have Mentor Tech or mentoring program, and they have done it. And we'll have a discussion like favorite movies. And then we also broke into smaller groups. These groups developed quick ad for their favorite movie, which was really fun. Hopefully mine will never get out to the public.
That actually sounds like a really great idea, especially right now when we can't do programming. This is probably the one thing that hit me the hardest with my job this year. I was planning on starting a glut of programming. But that was kind of what I was put on task to do since the government publications process. That's more or less finished at this point. So I was asked, since I had already started to formulate plans for programming, was there other stuff that I could think of that would maybe be fun, that would be interesting for the students? Every single thing that I had planned is just put on hold at the least. Like some stuff I just had to cancel outright. And something like this, like these virtual, not really programming, but it's like you said, it's mental health basically. That's a really interesting way of dealing with the problem of like, how do we use our library, the term that I've really come to enjoy with class is the library as a place. It's a place that's safe and fun and just here for the students. And that's kind of what the programming was going to be about. Without the physical space, we still have an option of giving something back to the public. I think that that's a really great idea that you've hit on just now.
Thank you. I agree. Libraries are so much about programming, and that has come to a virtual halt. Now, we are looking at doing a celebration of the Dia de Muertos, Day of the Dead. For the last couple of years, we had put up an altar in our Crossland room, sort of where we had coffee bar, which is closed, and nice plants and stuff. And we're going to continue that, and we're hopefully we'll have some streaming video of people talking about Dia de Muertos. And we've been talking, well, do we need to have stickers for social distancing? And I'm not sure if we will, because it's going to be more people will be just walking down, but we may end up doing that because I can see people going by slowly, looking at the pictures, and we're inviting people to bring pictures of their deceased loved ones.
Oh, that's really great.
Yeah, that sounds really fascinating. Obviously, I don't want to say that that sounds fascinating by any means, but just the fact that you're able to do this celebration of something that's so major in a culture that's not really US American. It's something that a lot of people don't really even put much thought into here, but it's such a huge celebration. I'm really floored away by all that. That sounds like a fantastic program.
I agree. It is really a great program, and people really like it. And each year we have lots of pictures contributed. So it's nice that we're able to continue doing that. And hopefully in the future, we'll be able to get back to programming, because in the Crossland room, a couple years ago, we bought a lot of AV equipment and had a number of book signings and lectures and such. And we had recorded them so that people could view them afterwards. And now it's just an area for study, which is good, but it would be nice to make the library more of a place, as you say.
It almost makes it clinical at that point. And for a place that's also supposed to be relaxing in a way, like you don't want the students to just come in here and think of it as a place for books. Like it's not just where you're going to go to check out your books. It needs to have a feel to it.
Not to get off track, but we only have a few minutes left, and I did want to ask Tom a few more questions before we leave. The first one I wanted to ask you is, and I'm bringing this up because I know some of the faculty might be listening to our podcast. Hopefully faculty listen to our podcast.
Faculty, please.
Would want to know, how's Texas Tech? Because again, we're in negotiations to be purchased by Texas Tech and become part of the Texas Tech family. So I'm sure a lot of the faculty would like to know, how are things at Tech? I mean,
hold on, that's public knowledge, right? We can talk about that, can't we?
It was announced months ago.
Okay.
Again, we're still in negotiations. Nothing's gone forward, but yeah, we're in negotiations for it.
That's right. And that would be great to have you join us. I would say Tech is doing well. We get a number of updates about research and lab usage. And now my background has always been the social sciences, not the sciences. But from what I can gather, I think Tech is doing very well in helping our faculty continue all the important research. We have at the Reese, former Reese Air Force Base, we have a lot of research going on there, as well as on the Tech campus and elsewhere. And so I think we are doing well. And I say this because Lubbock has what I consider pretty high COVID rate. I think it was the other day, 73. And so that's a constant challenge, but I think tech has really worked. We have something called the Texas Tech commitment to the faculty, staff, and students on doing the best that we can. And when I go to work on campus, I feel safe, and I think we are doing very well given the circumstances.
Well, that's great to hear. I mean, we're kind of in the same exact boat. Lubbock's a little bit larger than Wichita Falls. Actually, based on population, it looks like it's exactly double the size of Wichita Falls. But yeah, this week we just started to get record-breaking numbers, and those numbers are just getting higher. So we're in the same boat. Well, we've been going on for about an hour, and I don't want to keep you, Tom. Although, I mean, there are a million things that we could talk about. If you have a chance to listen to the podcast that we're just starting to put out, we're having a few podcasts that have nothing to do with libraries. This is a great getting back on track, almost. The last one we did was entirely Halloween and horror focused, so...
I definitely will listen to that. Guys, I really like this idea. I think that's wonderful that you're doing this. I love podcasts. A lot of my coworkers have definite favorites, so I will be a listener of your podcast.
Wonderful. And I certainly hope that we can have you on sometime in the future.
Well, thank you. I would love to come back. This is a great thing that you all are doing.
As Chris says, he's in charge of programming, and we did shut down the building as far as programming goes. So he's like, I'm doing a podcast. So
yeah, I brought that up. We had a little bit of pushback, but for the most part, it's been really positive from the librarians and the staff who have listened to it. We actually had a request to not edit that much, and
I'll get into that next week about my editing journey that I did yesterday.
Yeah,
but we'll get into that.
I would call that an odyssey. Let's bump that up from just plain old adventure or journey. But yeah, it was really great talking to you, Tom. I'm really glad that you got to come on and talk to us about your very unique position.
Well, I appreciate it. You all have always been a very strong repository, and plus all the other things you do. Sometimes I focus maybe too much on government information, but you're a strong library. And I remember when I visited you back in the day when we were still doing a lot of on-site visits, have a very nice library.
Oh, thank you. You should definitely come by and see our new renovations. The whole building has changed. It looks like a brand new place.
I would like to do that.
Then yeah, absolutely. Just let us know if you'd ever like to come by and get a tour.
Okay. That on my to-do list because you all are not far from us. And in Texas, I found, coming from Colorado, people drive fairly long distances, think nothing of it.
That's for sure. My family lives around Texarkana. That's a 5-hour drive just to go back home. When you live here, you just kind of assume that that's just part of it.
And with that, I think we're going to say goodbye to Tom, and we're going to close out the podcast. We're a little bit over, but maybe I can trim some stuff in post. We'll see. Again, thank you, Tom, for being with us. And I think that is the end of the podcast.
I think that'll do it. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Tom, so very much for coming on. Thank you for listening. And we will be back next time with something completely different.